Again, we would like to invite everyone to please go back to your proper seat. Bangsamoro at the national and the local levels. Hello po sa inyo. Kiyan. Mga ilang libo ba to, Victor? Currently, our views in the Bangsamoro Government page is now almost 7,000 views. after we just launched the event. Ano? So medyo marami-rami ho yung nakatutok sa atin ngayon. We hope that number is being maintained. In a few minutes, we will begin the afternoon session of the first Bangsamoro Peace and Security Summit. Just a recap what happened kaninang umaga. We were provided with updates, the real things, ongoing happenings so dito sa grounds. We're very happy ng ating mga authorities mula sa Government of the Philippines as well as from the Bangsamoro Government provided updates on the real happenings sa ground. At sinundan ho ito nung kwento ng ating mga kababayan na apektado ho ng giyera sa SPMS Box mula sa Mama Sapano, sa Talitay, sa Dato Saudi Ampatuan, sa South UP at sa iba-ibang panig ho sa probinsya ng Maguindanao. And those are very good stories. We're hoping that those stories have inspired everyone, the policymakers, service providers, as well as developmental partners to design and implement interventions that are responsive and timely dun sa needs ng ating mga kababayan. At we're hoping na hindi ito magtatapos sa mga kwento lamang Miss Milan. We hope that we could really establish yung gusto ho natin mangyari na kapayapaan at kaunlaran sa ating bayan. Sinundan ho ito nung pagbabahagi ng 6 na sektor o clusters para ho mapunan yung mga pangangailangan, matugunan yung pangangailangan ng mga apektadong communities. These clusters include yung sa religious, sa security, human rights, sa indigenous people, planning and development, as well as the humanitarian response and the civil society organizations. At the civil society organization, siguro importante rin na idiin natin dahil kasama sa pag-uusap nila during the pre-summit workshop, yung transitional justice and reconciliation, na hindi gaanong na-highlight kanina. The TJR is an important component ng peace building at ito ay sa pamamagitan ng active listening process. Importanteng pinapakinggan ho natin yung pong mga saloobin at emotions and thoughts ng ating mga kababayan, especially those who were victims and survivors of the various conflicts that took place here in the Bangsa. At kailangan ho nating i-push yung sabay na pagkakaroon ng national consciousness para yung transformational relationship would take place also. Yun po yung mga importante pag-uusap. Diniin din nung nasa human rights yung kailangang may engagement talaga ang bawat sektor. Mahirap gawin pero importante at kritikal na proseso na kailangan ho natin gawin. I think the religious sector, si Mufti Udasan, has also highlighted very well the need for us to, the approach should be non-violent. Reconciliation is an important approach, even in the Islamic teaching. Importante yun kung kailangan non-violent yung approach natin na nakabase sa katotohanan and justice as well as accountability. Sa indigenous people, again, dahil mga kasama natin sila, we've coexisted with our indigenous peoples, neighbors, brothers and sisters, peacefully for the longest time. Pero madami ho silang mga hinanaing at mga needs na kailangan humpunan ng ating lipunan. And so it's just right that we respond to the needs and panawagan ng ating mga kapatid na IPs. And then all of those were put into a very good plan. Meron hong plano, yun po yung magandang balita. There is a good plan. Meron hong mga programang maayos at may budget. 1.7 billion yung nakikitang ilalaan para sa mga gagawin natin sa susunod na mga araw. And this will be implemented. And I think now, the question is, where do we go from here? Saan ho tayo patungo mula sa lahat ng napakagandang mga agendang iyon? Ano po yung dapat natin gawin? How do we ensure that all of those good agenda, are going to be implemented efficiently and effectively? Paano ho natin masisigurong maayos ang pagkaka-implementa at maisasagawa yung lahat ng mga panawagan at mga adhikain ng bawat sektor na ito? So, we will now proceed to the afternoon session of the first Bangsamoro Peace and Security Summit. Welcome everyone, and we hope that this afternoon will again equally provide you important inputs na matututunan po natin. So, para ho sa probably kasagutan dun sa ating katanungan, where do we go from here? Moving forward, ano ho yung gagawin ng ating government, the Bangsamoro Government, in order to implement all of this agenda? Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin with the presentation of the Plan of Action for Peace, Security, and Development. And this will be presented to us by the Minister of the Ministry of Interior Local Government, our dear Honorable Minister, Attorney Nagib G. Sinarimbo. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Una ho ay gusto natin pasalamatan yung mga kasama natin na dumalo at nag-participate actually nung series of workshops undertaken before ho tayo dumating sa summit. Si Chief Minister ho, si Speaker ng Bangsamoro Parliament, partner ho natin from the security sector, si Major General Juby Max Uy, ang commander ho ng Joint Task Force Central, at the same time ay commanding officer ng 6th Infantry Division, si General Ugali ho from the ProBar, mga kasama natin from the different ministries, mga local government units, civil society organizations, partners from the development world, mga kasama ko ho na trabahante sa gobyerno. Magandang hapon ho sa atin lahat. Ang sa akin ho ay yung pong integration ng lahat ng outputs ng 7 na sectors or clusters na nagpresent na kanina. Ang isa lang hong cluster na hindi yata nagpresent kanina yung governance sector. Pero naka-integrate na ho yun dito. Yung this afternoon's presentation will essentially try to bring together yung pong 7 kanina na pinresent earlier. Yung summit ho was actually a decision of the cabinet led by the Chief Minister, Alhaj Murad Ibrahim, a month ago to undertake a summit that will hopefully bring together yung iba-ibang sectors in the Bangsamoro to focus yung effort at one ending quickly the conflict, in particular in the SPMS box at saka yung ibang areas na na-influence nito. And hopefully the whole of Maguindanao, and then transition very quickly into rehabilitation and development. This is an offshoot of the earlier engagement of the national government through the Bangsamoro Task Force on Ending Local Armed Conflict, which is chaired by the Chief Minister in the region, and the courts for this is no less than the Secretary of the National Defense. Yung summit also intends to address the existing armed conflict in the SPMS box and the adjoining areas. So, from our conversations in the summit, in the pre-summit activities, we've come to learn that the conflict is gradually affecting some other communities, apart from what used to be the SPMS box. So, umaabot na ho yan ng South Upi, abot na ng Datopiang, Recently, umabot na rin ho sa Dato Paglas. And the aim is to mobilize all stakeholders to influence yung communities and reinforce the pursuit of peace and sustainable development in the Bangsamoro region. Ang objective natin, essentially, is to adopt a comprehensive and strategic approach in partnership with all stakeholders to end the conflict and transition smoothly to reconstruction, rehabilitation, and development of conflict-affected communities. As a result of that, we've looked at the earlier convergence framework, which was adopted by the Regional Peace and Order Council of the regional government, and at the same time, discussed thoroughly in the Bangsamoro Task Force, yung ELAC, of looking at a whole-of-society approach to ending the conflict in the Bangsamoro region. So we were looking at essentially what the BARM is, taking into account the unique historical, cultural, political, and geographic context of the Bangsamoro. And then addressing risk and vulnerabilities affecting the Bangsamoro through dun sa structural, institutional, social, and individual in the light of the pandemic. So meron pa tayong overlay ng current challenge natin ng pandemic. And then building on existing and emerging opportunities within the BARM. So the region is very unique because one, we are just establishing a new government in the Bangsamoro, which was the result of a peace agreement. In the peace agreement, the implementation of which follows through two parallel tracks. One is the political track, and the other one is the normalization track. Apart from that, we do have existing engagement with the national government. Part of that is the task force on ending armed conflict in the Bangsamoro. So, yun ho yung complexity in the region. So, we wanted to adopt a convergence where BARM ministries, local government units, the community itself, development partners, and the security sector will work together to ensure that we have a whole-of-society approach in dealing with one, prevention and preparation, second, response and recovery, third, adaptation and innovation. The overall dream is to create resilient Bangsamoro communities, communities that are able to deal with conflict, recurrence of which, or adapt quickly into new set of circumstances in the region. So yun ho yung aim natin. Yung resiliency framework natin looks at a more integrative and holistic approach to strengthen community resilience within the Bangsamoro region. And then it is supposed to establish and facilitate an inclusive and culturally sensitive process to effectively address natural and human-induced disasters, including horizontal conflict and the pandemics. In the history of the region, we have had a long history of conflict, which is vertical. Essentially, the national government, state forces as against revolutionary organizations. It's a fight between those that are asserting the right to self-determination and the Philippine state apparatus. But because of the peace agreement, we are done with that type of conflict. What has increased so far is the horizontal conflict. Includes RIDO, conflict among political groups. So, eto na ho yung kinakaharap natin. To ensure convergence among different actors and stakeholders through coordination, collaboration, and capacity building in relation to strengthening community resilience in the Bangsamoro. And then we wanted to ensure efficient and swift action implementation through participatory, deliberative, and sustainable approach. We wanted to do away with a lot of processes that in the end do not respond with specific actions to many of the challenges confronted by our community. So as much as we can, we wanted it to be one that is action-oriented. what are the highlights of the pre-summit activities? So before we actually went here, we created the following clusters. One is local governance cluster, which was led by our ministry, the Ministry of the Interior and Local Government. The second cluster is the religious sector cluster, led by the Darul Ifta. The third is the security sector cluster, led by the Office of the Senior Minister. The third is the human rights cluster, led by the Bangsamoro Human Rights Commission. The fifth is the development planning cluster, led by the Bangsamoro Planning and Development Authority. The sixth is the humanitarian response and civil society organization participation cluster under MSSD and MBHTE. And then last but not the least is the indigenous peoples cluster, taking into account that there are Bangsamoro communities that are still struggling to find meaningful participation in the government and beset by certain issues, including conflict in their communities. Activities undertaken by the clusters, for instance, under the local governance cluster, we've consulted with law enforcement agencies such as the AFP, PNP, and the provincial office and the MLGOs of the different municipalities. A second was a dialogue with 183 barangays in the SPMS box municipalities, including the municipalities of South Upi, Dato Paglas, and Talitay, which was held at Dato Udin Sinsuat, Maguindanao. We did a consultation dialogue with local chief executives in the province of Maguindanao. So all of the mayors of Maguindanao attended. And then we did a consultation dialogue with Liga ng mga Barangay Municipal Chapter Presidents in Maguindanao. So we had a separate, more intensive engagement with 183 barangays inside the SPMS box and influence municipalities. And then we did one which involves all of the barangays of the province through the Liga ng mga Barangay. So lahat ho in reality of the barangays in Maguindanao have been engaged. For the security sector cluster, they held a dialogue between BARM and the MILF BIAF, including the front commanders, the base commanders, and the senior commanders of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Another consultation was done with the security sector. This includes brigade commanders, battalion commanders, police officers of the Philippine National Police in Maguindanao province. And then the human rights cluster did a consultation on May 21, 2021. The development planning cluster, led by BPDA, did a workshop on the adoption of a comprehensive development plan framework for the conflict-affected communities last May 20, 2021. Yung pong humanitarian response and CSO participation cluster under MSSD and MBHTE, they did a consultation on enhancing humanitarian response and CSO meaningful participation last May 18. Yung pong indigenous peoples cluster did a consultation on enhancing the protection of the rights of indigenous peoples and the potentials of indigenous mechanisms in achieving peace and development last May 19, 2021. So in reality, all of the 7 clusters did different dialogues and consultations leading up to the summit today. What do we expect from the summit and the series of pre-summit activities that we've done? We expect the adoption of a manifesto and commitment among all key development players to work collectively for speedy transformation of conflict-affected communities into zones of peace and development. Second is the identification and deflation of organized groups operating in the areas as undesirable groups that do not deserve community support. So if we've identified these groups, and from the discussions, we've identified them to be BIFF, Dawla Islamia, ISIS-inspired groups, private armed groups, to be undesirable groups, and that there has been a very unequivocal declaration that these do not deserve community support. Third is that we wanted to adopt a security cooperation between all stakeholders, including the formulation of a master development plan for the SPMS BACs and the adjoining communities. So moving beyond conflict, ending the conflict, we should also move quickly towards a development plan for SPMS BACs that essentially addresses the gaps in terms of development in these areas. What were the issues and challenges identified in the pre-summit activities? We have a list that we wanted to share with you from the different sectors. One is on local governance cluster. The following were the issues and challenges identified. One is people's participation in local governance. There is a perception, or at least an opinion coming from our stakeholders, that people's participation in local governance is not at the ideal. Second is poor education and poverty, which is being taken advantage of by greedy individuals or even groups. And then the trust of community to law enforcement. So there's a question of trust among communities as to the efficiency of law enforcement agencies. And the security of communities against intrusions of armed groups. So communities are raising the challenge of these groups entering their communities. And especially for barangays or villages, they feel that they do not have the sufficient power to counter yung intrusions of the armed groups. Local government capacity to respond to armed groups or conflicts. So there's limited capacity for LGUs to be able to decisively respond to a more organized armed groups. And then the presence of loose firearms, and then poor delivery of basic services in the governance cluster. These were the issues and challenges identified. In the security cluster, there's a need to establish or strengthen mechanism in the peace process to improve coordination and cooperation among the PNP-FP and BIAF, or the Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces. So it's a recognition that while there are mechanisms established in the peace process, the same needs to be strengthened. There's an issue of trust and confidence among AFP, PNP, and the Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces on the ground. It's also the complexity of the need to neutralize lawless elements outside of groups that have actually entered into peace agreement, and then minimizing the collateral damage such as civilian properties during law enforcement operations. So there's a recognition that there are collateral damages during law enforcement operations, such as the loss of lives, destruction of properties. On the religious cluster, there is a perception of an unnecessary conflict within family circle or among clans, which is more popular as the Rido. And then there's a need to issue religious guidance against lawless extremist groups. Since the interpretation of the religious text is contested, there is the imperative of a religious authority issuing a religious guidance as against lawless extremist groups. On the humanitarian response cluster, there is recent displacement in the Bangsamoro region, which is really ongoing. So for the past decades, as you would have, if you listen to the stories coming from the ground, especially the one presented by the mother who gave birth to her child inside the evacuation center, there is multiple displacement already in the in the area, and the lack of people's participation in conflict management and resolution. So people feels that they are not part of the process of settling and managing the conflict in the area. And there is a need to reassess the role and participation of the local government units in peace building and in ensuring the protection of communities. On the human rights cluster, the following issues and challenges were observed: displacement, destruction of property, torture and harassment, culture impurity, ingrained belief of Muslim Christians, othering, reinforcing stereotypes, armed non-state actors, private armed groups, utilizing them as means for them to get support from civilians. On indigenous peoples cluster, access to health and education services, land conflict in ancestral domain, unemployment of indigenous peoples, participation of IP in decision-making processes, implementation of both RA 8371, RA 11054, and the IP provision that needs to be implemented, and the recruitment of youth and IPs to lawless groups or elements. Planning and development cluster is the recurring displacement due to natural and human-induced disasters, poor functionality of some local government units, limited socioeconomic opportunities. So these are the issues and challenges discussed by the different cluster. Let me acknowledge, however, the work of the local government units in the province of Maguindanao. In particular, let me pay attention to the local chief executives who participated all throughout the pre-summit activities and are present today. These are the municipalities of Ampatuan, Barira, Buldon, Buluan, Dato Abdullah Sangki, Dato Anggal Midtimbang, Dato Bla Sinsuat, Dato Hofer Ampatuan, Dato Udin Sinsuat, Dato Muntawal, Dato Piang, Dato Paglas, Dato Salibo, Dato Saudi Ampatuan, Dato Unsay, Gindulungan, Kabuntalan, Mama Sapano, Magudadato, Matanog, Northern Kabuntalan, Paglat, Pandag, Parang, Raja Boyan, Sharif Agwak, Sharif Saiduna Mustafa, South Upi, Sultan Kudarat, Sultan Mastura, Talayan, Talitay, and Upi. The League of Liga ng mga Barangay Presidents, Municipal Chapters are also here, and these are from Dato Saudi Ampatuan, Dato Salibo, South Upi, Dato Piang, Sharif Saiduna Mustafa, Raja Boyan, Dato Paglas, Sultan Sabarungis, Ampatuan, Dato Hofer Ampatuan. So this has been an affair that has been heavily engaged by the local chief executives of the different municipalities in the province of Maguindanao. So what are the actions and ways forward? Let me outline very quickly the actions and ways forward. One is on local governance. There's a declaration of the BIFF and the Dawla Islamiyah and other terrorist groups as persona non grata in all local government units and conflict-affected barangays in the province of Maguindanao. To date, 29 local government units have already made the declaration that the BIFF, Dawla Islamiyah, and other terrorist groups are persona non grata in their municipalities. 7 local government units have subjected the issue for a deliberation by their sanggunian and will ultimately make the declaration that these are persona non grata, the BIFF, Dawla Islamiyah, and other terrorist groups. The provincial government of Maguindanao declared persona non grata the BIFF, the DI, and other terrorist groups. 352 out of the 508 barangay local government units in Maguindanao have declared persona non grata the BIFF, DI, and other terrorist groups. The Liga ng mga Barangay supports the declaration of the BIFF the Dawla Islamiyah, and other terrorist groups as persona non grata. So overall, as far as the local government units are concerned, from barangay, municipalities to the province of Maguindanao, substantial support for ensuring that these groups do not find community support. And there's also the need, and it's now being undertaken, the institutionalization of the task force on ending local armed conflicts. It's also commitment to improve community service-oriented policing, and then strengthen local peace mechanisms. These are the local special bodies. Increase local investment on peace sustainability, and improve access to basic services. In the security cluster, the following are the actions and ways forward. Cooperation of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, AFP and PNP on law enforcement operations. Activation of the JPSC and JPSTs based on the Annex on Normalization. Confidence building exercises among AFP, PNP, and the Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces. Enrollment of surrenderies in Project Tugon, ECLIP, and other local interventions. Religious sectors should strengthen and intensify advocacy against lawless elements such as BIFF, Dawla Islamiyah, ISIS-inspired group, private armed groups, and drug syndicates using religious teaching to justify their campaign. Adopt a coordinated approach through tri-media and social media, conduct symposium fora to the conflict-affected areas, conduct dialogue to civilian populace in relation to the adverse effects of lawless elements' activities in their areas. Awareness program on ending local armed conflict, or the ELAC, regular and timely sharing of intelligence report, BIA, Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces, Moro Islamic Liberation Front may act on supportive role during law enforcement operations such as providing guide, information sharing, blocking the exit, etc. upon request subject to approval of both parties. Adherence to the rule of law. All parties should avoid coddling any lawless elements such as BIFF, DI, ISIS-inspired groups, private armed groups, and drug syndicates. Filing of appropriate criminal cases to personalities coddling and taking into custody lawless elements such as BIFF, DI, ISIS-inspired group, private armed groups, and drug syndicates in identified camps or communities, and removal or delisting from the roll of members. This is in particular with the Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces. So if they are found to have become part of drug syndicates or identified with BIFF and DI, they will be removed and delisted from the rosters of the Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces. And then defensive military actions against lawless elements such as BIFF, DI, ISIS-inspired group, private armed groups, and drug syndicates who will cross or traverse the BIAF, MILF communities until they surrender. AJAG shall inform the GPH and the MILF CCCH at least 24 hours. This is already contained in the terms of reference of the AJAG and the CCCH. And then there's a proposal for a joint coordinating center composed of the GPH, MILF, and IMT, which shall convene prior to law enforcement operations to avoid the necessary armed confrontation between MILF and the armed forces that results in the displacement of civilians. Official declaration from the Hayatul Ulama and Darul Ifta on the permissibility of pursuing military actions against lawless elements such as BIFF, DI, ISIS-inspired group, private armed groups, and drug syndicates, and ensure the safety of the life of civilians and the protection of civilians and the protection of their properties. Religious cluster, the provision of religious guidance based on the acceptable international principles on peace. Humanitarian response cluster, collaboration between the Bangsamoro Government and the humanitarian agencies and development partners on information and IDP data management and relief assistance for conflict-affected communities. Observe the rules of engagement in war provided for by the International Humanitarian Law or IHL and other pertinent international covenants. Immediate, dignified, and safe returns of all IDPs, LGU, CSO, NGO collaboration. Human rights cluster, the cessation of hostilities to establish a peaceful environment for dialogue, call for dialogue and reach out to BARM's former comrades, civilian education to encourage perception of military presence as protectors of civilians, use law to address the issue, ensure CAB agreement of MILF and GPH working together to dismantle PAGs, reinforce mechanisms already provided in the BOL, multi-sectoral monitoring mechanisms to ensure that IHL is observed, education and advocacy efforts from the BHRC with identified topics for modules with focus on collaboration with local government units. Just before proceeding to the issue of the IPs, let me just clarify that in the framing of the actions and ways forward, as discussed in the different cluster, the primary consideration is that the BIFF and the Dawla Islamiyah, as well as the other ISIS-inspired group, have earlier made a declaration that they will not go for a negotiations or dialogue, which is why you do not find in the discussions of the MILF and the security cluster the approach of opening up a dialogue first, because the groups have already closed the venue for dialogue. And so the actions really is towards a cooperation between the armed forces, the PNP, and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front so that we can protect the communities. Only when they return to negotiations will negotiations be reopened. So we do not proceed from negotiations where the other parties have clearly rejected negotiation as an option. So you remember in 2008, when the MOA AD failed, part of the MILF, which is now the BIFF, declared that they will not go for negotiations, which is why they have actually separated from the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. So just a note, so that people who are curious about the approach being discussed would have the historical context on why this discussion is proceeding from this perspective. On indigenous peoples cluster, going back, the allocation of scholarship program, inclusion of tribal dialect on learning materials, construction of school buildings, coordination within the affected communities, legal assistance on land and other resource based on tribal conflicts, mediation between IPs and Muslims, full implementation of the IP code in BARM. They will be included in special enlistment in the Philippine Army, and then on planning and development cluster, conflict sensitive and peace monitoring, development planning, regional investment program for conflict affected areas. I will go back to the planning and development cluster in a bit at the last slides. And then we have the following commitments from the key stakeholders. One, municipalities commit to declare persona non grata the Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Freedom Fighters, Dawla Islamiyah, communist terrorist groups, and other terrorist groups. 183 barangays in the conflict areas committed to declare the BIFF as persona non grata, as well as the Dawla Islamiyah, communist terrorist groups, and other terrorist groups. Liga ng mga barangays in the province of Maguindanao already issued a commitment to support all effort to end local armed conflict. Province of Maguindanao has declared the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters as persona non grata. Local law enforcement agencies commit to ensure cooperation and collaboration with local government units. The BARM and local government units ensure delivery and access to basic services in the affected communities, encourage participation of all sectors in local governance. Local government units invest substantial resources in sustaining peace and order. To note, by next year, the Mandanas ruling will take effect, additional 36% would already be given to local government units as a result of the decision in the Mandanas case. So they will have increased internal revenue allocation. The religious sector through the Bangsamoro Darul Ifta will continuously provide guidance based on the acceptable international principles on peace and development. Leaders of indigenous people to support the BARM government effort on ending local armed conflict and shall declare persona non grata the BIFF, Dawla Islamiyah, communist terrorist groups, and other terrorist organizations. The security cluster and the MILF commit to ensure compliance on the peace agreements mechanisms. The security sector and the MILF commit to ensure coordination and collaboration on law enforcement operations. The security sector and the MILF commit to promote and develop social healing and community cohesion. The security sector and the MILF continuously will work on confidence building measures. MILF to ensure that the recognized camps areas shall not be used as sanctuary of terrorists and criminal groups or individuals. The human rights cluster commit to create a multi-sectoral sustaining monitoring mechanism to ensure that the mandates of the BHRC are satisfactorily implemented and that the IHL is faithfully observed. The BHRC commits to serve as the lead convener, and the convening group includes the municipal LGUs, CSOs, municipal-based POs, human rights-based organizations, development partners, legal-based organizations, and other existing mechanisms on the ground. The CSOs commit to build synergy and to support and strengthen its capacities on conflict monitoring, mediation, and peace dialogues. The civil society organizations commit to create a multi-sectoral monitoring team to ensure civilian protection and respect for human rights and monitor the implementation of the resolution during this peace summit. So what are the investments and programs that are ready to be funded and implemented? As earlier mentioned during the presentation of the BPDA, the investment programming, as summarized, is BRACE. The strategy is called BRACE, or Belief and Spiritual Awareness, Resilient Communities, Access to Quality Services, Concrete Conflict Resolution, Effective and Efficient Governance, Development in a Holistic Approach. What has been agreed in the Cabinet is that for 2021, the programs and projects of the different ministries that are already funded by 2020 and 2021 budget will already be mobilized to address the development gaps in the SPMS box. What that means is that there are programs that are already funded, such as roads, bridges, water system, government centers, agricultural inputs, farm machineries that are already funded in 2020 and 2021. The 2020 budget has been extended up to December 2021. So the validity of that appropriation is extended up to December of this year. That means ministries may utilize actually two funds. One is 2020, the other is 2021. For this purpose, the ministries are authorized to already implement these projects in the SPMS box and the areas nearby, so that we already have an investment ready in the SPMS box. The other one is that the estimated 1.7 billion investments that is needed to address the development gap in the SPMS box, the Chief Minister already authorized the rescheduling of the submission of the budget of the different ministries. From supposedly tomorrow, it has been moved to a week later, so that the output in this summit may now be included by the different ministries in their proposed 2022 budget. So doon ho kukunin yung pinag-uusapan nating investment rito. So in a sense, very clear yung way forward as far as budget for the identified projects in this summit. So yung pong mga na-identify na yan Either funded na yan ng 2020 or 2021, or if not, we can have it funded by 2022. So in summary, yung pong output, yung issues and challenges, and then you have the strategy that addresses the challenges has been identified. The ministries will go into the details of the projects. They can either mobilize their existing resources or propose it as a project for 2022. So we have a very concrete plan for resolving the development gap in the SPMS box, as well as addressing very quickly the conflict in this area. So ulitin ko lang po, ready ho tayo, funded ho yan, kaya hong gawin. Basta ho, magkaisa tayong lahat. Maraming salamat po ulit. Magandang hapon po sa atin lahat.
Minister Attorney Nagib G. Sinarimbo of MILG. Ayun po. So we have clear actions and ways forward. Lahat ng mga agenda natin kaninang umaga are well integrated into this. Sa pagpapatuloy ho, we will now have the commitments from the different agencies. Joining us live at the Zoom, we have the Cabinet Officer for Regional Development and Security for BARMM and the Secretary of the National Defense. We would like to call in our dear Secretary Delphine and Lorenzana.
Interior and Local Government Secretary and BARM Chief Minister Ahod Ibrahim, Interior and Local Government Secretary and Anyo, Presidential Peace Advisor Charlie Galvez Jr., Governors of BARM, the Speaker of BARM, Ali Pangarian Balindong, other BARM ministers, other members of the security sector and attendants, security officials, other distinguished guests, and attendees, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Chief Minister Ibrahim, for inviting me to your Peace and Security Summit for Sustainable Local Development, which aims to discuss security issues and challenges in peace building. I commend you for yet another timely and significant activity as you formulate policies and initiatives aligned with our whole-of-nation approach to achieve unity and progress for all. Let me emphasize that the Bangsamoro Framework on Ending Local Armed Conflict, or ILAC, is patterned after the general framework of the National Task Force pursuant to Executive Order Number 70, adopted on ending local armed conflict to address the peculiarities of the BARM region. This is to direct your efforts towards the end goal of eliminating terrorists that have plagued the region for decades and establish a peaceful environment conducive to economic and social development. I am pleased to know that you have complemented EO 70 with an executive order aligning the 12 lines of effort of the National Task Force with social development projects to the region through the 12 ministries previously created. While at the national level, we have the Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program that grants complete package assistance to former rebels. BARM has tugon or tulong mula sa gobyernong nagmamalasakit. The Bangsamoro Government's humanitarian intervention to our brothers and sisters who have returned to mainstream society and the folds of the law. The Tugon cluster serves as the central coordinating body, supervising the reintegration of former members of the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, Mauti Group, Abu Sayyaf Group, and other terrorist groups as well as their immediate family members. Patunay ito ng sinseridad ng pambansang pamahalaan na gawing patas ang lahat para sa mga kapatid nating Muslim dito sa BARM mula sa mga pulisiya, programa, pundo hanggang sa mga proyektong pangkapayapaan at seguridad. As you formulate your plans, programs, projects, and activities, I want you to work doubly hard on our normalization track, the radicalization, decommissioning, rehabilitation, and development interventions for former combatants and conflict-affected communities in the region. Collectively, we will progress into a developed and thriving nation for the future generation. Kaisa ninyo ang kagawaran ng tanggulang pambansa sa inyong mga hangarin at pagsisikap para sa kapayapaan, seguridad at kaunlaran ng bansa higit lalo ng Muslim Mindanao. Maraming salamat, mabuhay ang BARM at mabuhay ang Pilipinas. Syukran.
Thank you, Secretary of National Defense, Delphine N. Lorenzana. Moving on, tayo po ay bibigyan ulit ng commitment mula ho sa Interior and Local Government. The Secretary Anu will be represented by the USEC Marjorie Haloshos, our Undersecretary for Mindanao Affairs and Special Concerns.
Hi everyone! Magandang tanghali po sa ating lahat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. To Chief Minister Ibrahim, Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, Secretary of National Defense, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., Abdul Rauf Makakua, Senior Minister, Office of the Chief Minister, BARM, Attorney Nagib Sinarimbo, MILG, Sir, Attorney Ali Pangalian Balindong, BTA Parliament Speaker, Governor Bay Mangundadatu, Provincial Governor of Maguindanao, General Juvimax Uy, to all BARM government officials, partner agencies, CSO representatives, and all the attendees and participants who are here today, isang mapagpalayang hapon po sa ating lahat. On behalf of Secretary Eduardo Año, I am pleased to present the DILG's presentation on the national programs on the promotion of peace and order and public safety for local governance. For our DILG mission, the department shall promote peace and order, ensure public safety, strengthen capability of local government units through active people participation, and a professionalized corps of civil servants. And our DILG vision is a strongly determined and highly trusted department committed to capacitate and nurture local government units, public order and safety institutions to sustain peaceful, progressive, and resilient communities where people live happily. Before I present the programs, let me first present the DILG's mission and vision. We in the DILG are firm in our community to our responsibility in ensuring that our communities are safe, peaceful, and orderly. For ending local communities' armed conflict and preventing violent extremism, we have communicating for perpetual end for extreme violence and performing alliance towards positive peace and enriched communities na tinatawag po namin C4Peace. Implementation of retooled community support program and capacitating urban communities for peace and development, and preventing and countering violent extremism and insurgency. Implementation of PCBE programs and activities to promote community resiliency to violent extremism and other threats to peace and security. One of the national programs to ensure peaceful, orderly, and safe LGUs is ending local communities' armed conflict and preventing violent extremism. The Executive Order number EO 70/2018 of the Duterte administration institutionalized a whole-of-nation approach in addressing the local communist insurgency. Giving birth to the National Task Force to End Local Armed Conflict, the NTF-LCAC is an interagency body composed of various national government agencies and private sector representatives working together to operationalize government policies for the attainment of an inclusive and sustainable, just, and lasting peace. The Returned Community Program was institutionalized as one of the convergence mechanism for local governments, particularly in the barangay level, for the identification of issues and needed government interventions. The Capacitating Urban Communities for Peace and Development aims to be the platform that empowers LGUs to resolve governance gaps. It aims to enhance government through local institutions and empowering communities to engage with the government for positive change. The main objective of the program is to empower LCEs to upscale governance and collectively champion the cause of sustaining peace and development by bridging leadership and enabling LGUs to harness all available opportunities to minimize, if not eradicate, the profound feeling of marginalization of the vulnerable sectors and enable them to participate in local governance. The government also implements preventing and countering violent extremism programs and activities to promote community resiliency to violent extremism and other threats to peace and security. Another project is the Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program, o tinatawag po naming ECLIP. The Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program and Amnesty Program Cluster is among the National Task Force ELCAC 12's clusters or line of efforts. ECLIP is a program for former rebels who have decided to abandon armed struggle and return to the folds of the law and mainstream the society. It is a peace-building and social protection program that provides interventions to former New People's Army, former rebels, and militant ng bayan is becoming productive citizens of society. The department, through the National Barangay Operations Office, ang aming NBOO department, facilitates administrations the financial package of assistance to FRs and militia ng bayan that provides immediate assistance 15,000 pesos, livelihood assistance 50,000 pesos, reintegration assistance for receiving units, and 21 million, and firearms remuneration, which is double the price of the cost valuation. As we continue to strengthen the government's efforts to attain just and lasting peace through the ECLIP, last April 16, 2021, the ECLIP PMO conducted the consultative meeting on ECLIP implementation in BARM. To discuss the BARM's comments and inputs on the proposed Memorandum of Agreement between the DILG and DND and Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, Ministry of the Interior and Local Government, to establish the commitments of the parties in support the efficient and effective implementation of the program in the BARM. With this, we are looking forward to discussing this MOA with the MILG BARM. As part of DILG's commitments to ensure peaceful, orderly, and safe LGUs, we also have programs for the strengthening of the capacities of local institutions and LGUs for peace and development. One of the programs we are currently conducting is the audit performance of peace and order councils and monitoring LGU peace and order plans accomplishments. We have also conducted the training of 525 barangays on skills enhancement to ensure that our communities are safe and orderly. There are also programs that are aimed towards better protecting our women and children. The department conducts the advocacy and capacity building for local institutions on women and children, such as capacitating BAUSI and BCPC members from justice zones on trafficking in persons and gender-based violence, formulation of comprehensive local juvenile intervention program, and in handling children at risk and children in conflict with the law. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the DILG, together with the other government agencies, partners in the civil society, and the local government units have worked together in ensuring the safety and security of women and children in our communities. One of the national priority programs to ensure our security, safety, and public order is to eradicate the country's illegal drug problem. Executive Order Number 66, signed by the President Rodrigo Roa Duterte on October 29, 2018, institutionalizes the Philippines Anti-Illegal Drug Strategy. Under the executive order, all government agencies, departments, bureaus, agencies, and offices, including government-owned or controlled corporations and state universities and colleges, are directed to implement the PADs in accordance with their respective mandates. Non-government organizations, civil society organizations, and private institutions are encouraged to actively support the project and programs under the PADs. LGUs are also encouraged to support and implement the PADs through the formulation and submission of their operational plans to the DDB, creation of their ADACs, work with PDEA and PNP in implementing the PADs. To coordinate with DOH relative to the assessment and management to those found using or abusing dangerous drugs, and to appropriate a portion of their annual appropriation for anti-illegal drugs programs, projects, and activities. The Anti-Drug Abuse Councils are mandated to plan, strategize, implement, and evaluate programs on drug abuse prevention, and to coordinate and collaborate with other institutions such as national agencies, other local government units, or civil society organizations who are also implementing programs and projects on drug abuse prevention. Creation of ADACs in all levels of local governments have been mandated by the department as early as 1998 by the Memorandum Circular number 98-227. Regardless of level of drug affectation, all government units through their respective ADACs are required to approve a local anti-drug abuse plan of action and appropriate funds for anti-illegal drugs related programs, activities, and operations. Likewise, ADACs are mandated to conduct advocacy and or preventive education seminars, continually enhance the capability of all stakeholders, ensure the sustainability of rehabilitation or treatment programs for drug dependence, and provide full support and assistance to the implementation of community-based drug rehabilitation programs. The DILG conducts the audit on the functionality and effectiveness of ADACs and BADACs nationwide. The DILG also strengthens the institutional capacities of ADACs and BADACs through conducting capacity development trainings of local government officials in the performance of their functions as member of the respective ADACs and BADACs. The E911 hotline is a DILG-run security and development program that provides response and emergency assistance to people in distress. Call scores through this number include those that require police assistance, fire reports, emergency medical assistance, search and rescue, even that concern chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive materials. I would also like to inform everyone that on last March 4, 2021, the Emergency 911 National Office, the Philippine Commission on Women, and the Asia Foundation, Inc., a memorandum of understanding intended for the adoption of the pocket guide and referral pathway in the establishment and management of a hotline response mechanism in handling violence against women and children reports of the 911 National Emergency Hotline. Ang MOU na ito ay magiging daan upang lalo pa nating mapaigting ang ating pagtugon sa mga violence against women and children reports na ating natatanggap sa Emergency Hotline 911. Through this initiative, we hope that we able to assist more women and children who are victims of violence and abuse. Rest assured that the Emergency 911 National Office is continuously operating to assist Filipinos with their emergencies. As for the supporting government's response on COVID-19, as part of the government's response of COVID-19, the Department of the Interior and Local Government, together with other government agencies such as Department of Labor and Employment, MMDA, hired and trained contact tracers for deployment to local government units. The deployment of contact tracers is part of the government's continuous effort to intensify our contact tracing program to contain the virus and to return to our normal day-to-day lives soon. To ensure public safety and peace and order, we have also programs and projects implemented by the Philippine National Police, the Bureau of Fire Protection, at ang BJMP. From the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, all three agencies have been at the forefront for our COVID-19 response. Our frontliners from the PNP, BFP, and BJMP are battle-hardened and have been serving our communities even against the height of the pandemic. For this, we applaud all security sector frontliners who are working double time during the pandemic by manning our checkpoints, ensuring that emergency services are running and ready to risk their lives to ensure that our communities are safe and peaceful. Kasama na rin po dyan ang ating mga barangay officials. For our Oplan Ligtas na Pamayanan in the BFP's flagship program in preventing household fires, the hallmark of the program involved educating, organizing, and empowering communities to identify fire hazards, provide first aid fire suppression through community fire auxiliary groups, and speed up reporting on ongoing fires through a system used by the local authorities and their fire stations. While kaisa is a sub-program of Oplan Ligtas ng Pamayanan aiming on forging partnerships between the BFP and industrial and commercial companies, which focuses on the exchange of knowledge and skills, resources, and coordination of manpower for the prevention and suppression of fire in these areas. The DILG, through the Task Force Bangon Marawi Office as a member of the Subcommittee on Security, Peace and Order, is also working together with the BFP BARM in PPAs para naman po sa Marawi City. As for the BJMP BARM is both a CSC Prime HRM Level 3 recognized and Level 2 Bronze awardee. All bills in BJMP BARM are also Red Orchid awardee with zero escape and zero COVID. For this, I would like to congratulate the BJMP BARM. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, the BJMP, through the BJMP Bangsamoro, has continuously provided support to ensure that the rights of PDLs are protected. Also, the BJMP BARM has conducted consultations with local government units and have worked together with the Bangsamoro Government as well as the national government in ensuring peace and security in the region. The DILG, through its Task Force Bangon Marawi Office, is also working together with the BJMP BARM in the monitoring of the construction of the new Marawi City Jail Project. Maraming salamat po sa pagkakataon na ito na makasama ko kayo sa inyong Peace and Security Summit. We in the DILG believe that is important to capacitate and sustain a society that is peaceful, progressive, and resilient. Naniniwala po kami na sa pagtutulungan ng national government at ng Bangsamoro Government ay mas mapapabuti pa rin natin ang ating mga programang pangkapayapaan at kaayusan sa ating bansa. Sa gitna po ng sunod-sunod na laban at hamon na patuloy nating hinaharap ngayong taon, ay masigit na kailangan nating magtulungan. The COVID-19 and the presence of other natural and human-induced disasters must not be viewed as a hindrance for the continuing commitment to ensure peace and development and to sustain its gains. Rest assured that the DILG is with the Bangsamoro Government and the local government units in the BARM to ensure peace and security in the region. Again, in behalf of our Secretary Eduardo Año, I would like to express our support and commitment to build a just and lasting peace for the Bangsamoro. Daghang salamat. Maayong hapon ka natong tanan.
Daghang salamat, Undersecretary Marjorie Halosos of DILG. Moving on, we will now have the updates on the Mindanao peace process at ito po ibabahagi sa atin. At this Secretary Galvez will be represented by the chair of the GPH Peace Implementing Panel, Mr. David B. Diciano.
Good afternoon to all, especially to our distinguished guests and speakers, Secretary Delphine Renzana, Secretary Eduardo Año, represented by USEC Marjorie Halosos, Chief Minister Ahod Ibrahim, Senior Minister Abdurrauf Magakua, Parliament Speaker Attorney Ali Pangalian Balindong, Minister Nagib Sinarimbo, Governor Bay Mariam Mangudadatu, Major General Jeffrey Max Uy, and Police Brigadier General Eden Ugali. Today, I shall be presenting on the updates in strategic priorities and initiatives on the Bangsamoro peace process. Here is the outline of my presentation. I'll be presenting on the GPH MILF and GPH MNLF peace process. Completion of the remaining commitments under the 1996 Final Peace Agreement. Government is currently engaging the two factions of the MNLF, namely the group under the leadership of the founding chairman Nur Miswari and another headed by Chairman Muslimin Sema, to complete the remaining commitments of the 1996 Final Peace Agreement. Two remaining commitments resulting from the tripartite review process of the 1996 Final Peace Agreement are the establishment of the Bangsamoro Development Assistance Fund, intended to uplift the conditions of the MNLF communities, and the creation of the tripartite implementation monitoring committee mandated to monitor compliances to these agreements. On the strategic priorities of the GPH MNLF peace process for 2021 to 2022. The OPAP under this administration is continuously strengthened partnership with the MNLF through the operationalization of peace coordinating committees with the two MNLF groups. For the next 2 years, we shall continue to deepen our engagement with the two groups, establish coordinating committees, and together endeavor to operationalize a transformation program for MNLF combatants, their families, and communities. Profiling of 5,000 MNLF combatants and provision of transitional assistance shall be pursued in 2021 to officially lay down the foundation towards the transformation of MNLF combatants and development of their communities. On the political level, we remain committed to the completion of the remaining commitments in the 1996 Final Peace Agreement. To this, we shall continue to engage with the MNLF and OIC towards firming up the groundwork for the activation of the Bangsamoro Development Assistance Fund and the establishment of tripartite implementation monitoring committee, the remaining areas for implementation of the 1996 Final Peace Agreement. Alongside socio-economic support, community healing and reconciliation initiatives shall also be facilitated in MNLF communities, and the implementation of amnesty program for MNLF members shall also be pursued beginning 2021. Qualified MNLF members shall also have the opportunity to enter the Philippine National Police subject to rules and regulations set forth by the NAPOLCOM. Further, the project, which aims to build capacities of women on leadership and participation, will begin implementation by June 2021. This shall include implementing innovative projects which instills the elements of women and youth empowerment, peace, and social cohesion. On the implementation of the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro. On the GPA's MILF peace process, shown is the roadmap for the implementation of the CAB, which has two tracks, the political track and the normalization track. Both tracks should run alongside and complementarily with each other. Based on the roadmap, we should already be at phase 3 of implementing the normalization process with the ratification of Republic Act number 11054 or the Bangsamoro Organic Law and the establishment of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority in 2019. However, the implementation of normalization is way behind the political track, as majority of the deliverables have been affected through travel restrictions and budget reallocation caused by the health crisis. Considering this, the runway for the full implementation of the commitments under the normalization track between now and the target signing of the exit agreement in 2022 is short, not to mention the total budget and resources required to completely deliver this commitment. Nonetheless, so much has already been achieved in the implementation of the normalization program. Shown are the accomplishments in the political track of the CAB. Accomplishments in the political track include the OPAP's facilitation and support to the enactment of the bond, establishment and capacitation of the BTA with all ministries under Article 16 of the bond, the BTA's enactment of the 3 of the 7 priority codes, the Administrative Code, Civil Service Code, and Education Code, approval of the Bangsamoro Development Plan, and the operationalization of the Intergovernmental Relations Body and other IGR mechanisms. Aside from being a member of the IGRB, OPAP also serves as the National Government Secretariat for the IGRB, facilitating the conduct of 8 IGRB meetings thus far, and the convening of the IGR mechanism and IGRB technical working groups, which aim to resolve issues between the national government and the Bangsamoro government. The OPAP also facilitated the creation of the Inter-Cabinet Cluster Mechanism on Normalization that supervises the national government efforts on the normalization program in the Bangsamoro, enabling efficient coordination of national government agencies in its implementation. On the security component of normalization, we have decommissioned 12,145 combatants and 2,175 weapons during phase 1 and 2 of decommissioning. We have also deployed 11 out of 15 joint peace and security teams. The GPSTs are operating units composed of contingencies from the AFP, PNP, and Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces of the MILF. They are tasked to work together for the maintenance of peace and order and stability of the areas mutually identified by the GPH and the MILF. Meanwhile, through our GPH Joint Normalization Committee, we have organized the National Task Force for the Disbandment of Private Armed Groups, ITABARM, and its adjacent regions of Region 9 to 12. Earlier this month, the DILG, as the lead agency of the NTF DPAGs, started its DPAGs rollout in Region 9 to raise awareness and capacity of LGUs in disbanding PAGs. To date, 8 PAGs have voluntarily surrendered as reported, which shows that the efforts of the GPH to exert pressure on these lawless elements to give up their illegal activities are now bearing fruit. We have also built partnership with the provincial local government units in BARM for the small arms and light weapons initiatives. Through the IGRB created TWG, OPAP is also assisting the NAPOLCOM and the PNP in the crafting of the guidelines for the entry of MILF and MNLF members into the PNP as provided for in the bond. The enhanced socio-economic packages under the program for normalization comprise interventions on social protection, livelihood, employment assistance, capacity development, and physical infrastructure. Social protection interventions include the immediate cash assistance amounting to 100,000 pesos per combatant in partnership with the DSWD, which were already provided to the 12,145 decommissioned combatants under Phase 1 and 2. Interventions under infrastructure include ongoing community-based interventions, particularly the construction and rehabilitation of irrigation systems with the NIA, the construction of rural health units with birthing facilities with the DOH and the MOH BARM, and solid waste segregation system with the DTI, which also created employment and livelihood opportunities for out-of-school youth and decommissioned MILF combatants.
Ay, hello. Nawala.
The OPAP entered into institutional arrangements with various agencies for the implementation of the socio-economic development programs, such as the DOLE for short-term and emergency employment programs, the DA for livelihood investment programs, and the TESDA and MBHTE for technical vocational training programs. Based on our assessment in the GPH with the various normalization mechanisms, shown are the major components that need to be completed under the program for normalization in the Bangsamoro. The decommissioning of 70% or approximately 28,000 MILF combatants are yet to be done. Parallel security arrangements, such as the disbandment of private armed groups, management of small arms and light weapons, dispute resolution, policing, and amnesty should be strengthened in order to ensure human security in the communities. Full socio-economic programs for the decommissioned combatants and their communities, development of the 6 previously acknowledged MILF camps, and programs on transitional justice and reconciliation should continue to roll out to complete the program for normalization. On the initial projection, as these are continuing socio-economic interventions requiring meticulous project management, these components will be completed by 2028, or 6 additional years from the previously agreed time frame of 2022. The transformation of the 6 MILF camps is also continuing pending approval and implementation of the camp transformation plan. Just like the socio-economic programs, this component requires massive amounts of funding. The rollout of TJR programs is also ongoing, while the TJR roadmap is still undergoing review by the MILF panel. The peace agreement between the GPH and MILF, which resulted to the signing of the CAB in 2014, The passage and ratification of the bond and the installation of the PTA and the BARM government have paved the way for eventual instability in Muslim Mindanao. We have seen a sharp decline and even recorded zero skirmishes between GPAs and MILF forces. However, localized and horizontal violence still persists. To resolve the cycle of violence and underdevelopment in the BARM, both by years of economic deprivation and political alienation, requires a multi-pronged approach that harnesses the cooperation of the national government and its instrumentalities, BARM government, security sector, local government units, and civil society. The success of peace building relies on good governance. A accountable government creates a conducive environment for peace and development to prosper, which enhances human security. Peace and security is constituted of and by good governance. While we mobilize support and strengthen initiatives to sustain the peace dividends, these are only made sustainable through a responsive and creative, people and service-oriented governance. As such, we see imperative to consider the following points consistent with the principles espoused in the CAB and the Bangsamoro Organic Law. On good governance, 1. Widen avenues for inclusive political participation. 2. Hasten the passage of the remaining codes. 3. Organize the Council of Leaders as avenue for dialogue. 4. Enhance the framework for cooperation between the regional government and the other local government units. 5. Entrench policies on transparency, accountability, and oversight, monitoring and public accessibility to governance. 6. Promote professionalism and meritocracy in service delivery and public administration. 7. Reduce enabling factors that nurture political patronage and clientelism. 8. Advocate policies that promote economic investments, ease of doing business, sustainability, and community resilience. 9. Promote programs for the minorities and vulnerable sectors. And the last, 10. Operationalize access to justice through the pluralistic justice system as provided in the bond. On peace and security, for the parties to remain steadfast in implementing the normalization program, including the decommissioning of MILF forces without delay. Intensify program on SALW, dispute resolution, and PACS. Seek a just and lasting solution to land conflict, especially in IP communities. Support the PNP's thrust of community-oriented policy. Assist in the full transformation of MILF combatants and MILF camps into productive and civilian members of the society. Improve observance of rule of law and human rights. In closing, with greater collaboration, sense of accountability and ownership among parties to sustain the peace dividends, the OPAP is one with the BARM government and all other stakeholders in promoting inclusive peace and security in the Bangsamoro. Thank you.
Chair of the GPH Peace Implementing Panel, Yusek David B. Diciano. Maraming salamat, sir. At this point, anyone who would like to express any statement of support, pwede ho kaming magbigay sa inyo ng kaunting oras. from our local chief executive officers as well as sa developmental partners. Any statement of an expression of support dun ho sa ating mga framework na pinresenta the whole day? Okay. I think we'll be hearing on them later ho. And now let's proceed with the message of affirmation from, nonetheless, our Chief Minister of the Bangsamoro Government, Chief Minister Ahod B. Ibrahim.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My courtesy to Secretary Delphin Lorenzana, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., represented by Yusek David Diciano, Secretary Eduardo Año, represented by Yusek Marjorie, Major General Joey Max Oy, Police Brigadier General Edna Ugali, and other officials from the security sector. BTA Parliament Speaker Attorney Pangalian Balindong and the members of the Parliament, Senior Ministers Abdul Rauf Makakwa, Minister Attorney Nagib Sinarimbo, to our colleagues in the Bangsamoro Regional Cabinet, to the local Chief Executive of the Province of Maguindanao, by Mariam Maudadato, our peace mechanism partners, our friends from the international development and humanitarian community, to our guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Bangsamoro, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and a pleasant and healthy afternoon to all of you. It is my honor to join all of you on the first Bangsamoro Peace and Security Summit. Throughout the day, we have been presented with the gravity of the security situations in the Bangsamoro, especially the infamous SPMS box. Gathered with us today are, of course, the most influential personalities in the field of peace and order, not just in the region, but in the country as well. Such is a manifestation of what we are up against and the importance of working with another to make sure that our constituents no longer suffer the scars of conflict and disarray. The Bangsamoro has been trapped on what is seemingly becoming an endless loop of war. For the past 4 decades, the national government and the Moro fronts entered peace agreements and procedures, all in hopes of making life better in this part of the country. But today, that narrative has been splintered and corrupted by groups that have no regard for our quest towards lasting peace and most certainly have no regard for the lives of the civilians who have been victimized throughout the years. With the installation of the BARM, a new dawn of harmony took hold in the region. The GPH and MILF were both committed in translating this common vision into existence. We are geared up to provide a bureaucratic overhaul that can address the nuances on the ground that some of these spoilers of peace used to justify their action. And so, we saw the need to put these armed escalations to rest. We cannot keep pushing forward for a renewed region if we keep turning back to violence. As MILF Chairman and BARM Chief Minister, I reiterate our support to make sure that the Bangsamoro becomes a haven of tranquility and optimism. This work cannot be done by one man alone. It will require all of us here and our respective offices, networks, and communities to work together in eliminating security threats in the auspices of the BARM. We are very thankful that almost all those invited to join this Peace Summit have presented and have expressed their support for this Peace Summit. From programs that can transform communities and avoid meaningless recruitment from extremist organizations to creating a strong coordination with our military and local government officials, this entire process involves all of us here in the spirit of our respective mandates and our collective love for the region and its great people. We have shown you the way forward as envisioned by the BARM. We look forward for the support of everyone in order to achieve our goal. Before I end, let me just speak in our own dialect, addressing to our brothers and sisters who are still not on board in the peace process, current peace process. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa bihi nasta'in. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Pagkaraman namin sa kanu, ang mga pagani namin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Katawan namin sa kanu, na tagapira namin sa kanu pinapanindig. Katawan namin so nasabad tano sa guna na dikiral kami mo ang nasabad. Kaapag sulango no minamo sa kanu pinapanindig kanu Bangsamoro. Marasa din sa maya ininukit mga kapasadan na pirmayan kanong gobyerno ng Pilipinas. Gayad na, yata nung kailan na niyaba na ulian niya na pasadan comprehensive agreement o di Bangsamoro na tinalima tanong ilango no mapya kanu nauna kapasadan na nakarudap nulango no ya kailan na dagit magkasugat na nasalin nambay sawapin Mikal Gano sa Chaksid implementation niya na uli ni agreement kaya Amerika din niya Chaksid yan nami karilon na di katawan kanupan ikatong tano sa solution agreement Amerika di tano kwana so bangnya nami sa kano sa ilay no muna ikapadaragoy upama kadi kano pagyug bakang pansanya ilay no muna di no muna kana upama na bangiray sa kita di makangularan kaya databanan tano sa piyay abumapas batana kanu ka ilay no kakalo-kalo na makasaksid na so kasaksid na di ka na sa kami buhay midsaksid karangon puntana. Diyan na ay bagadre sa amin kanurangon ng mga taga-parapaganay dapat unot sa lodop niya sa gobyerno na niya ba katawan namin rangon na yano tindag sa ginawa na paninindag ipanindag uso manakil tao ipanindag uso dalpa ipanindag uso agama Islam rangon taro na mamumbay tindagin tanong kailan na rangon anto ba ipanindag tanong anto na karo-karo may kadtatabangatan na inshallah ta'ala masampay tanong so siya po taman makangay namin, niya pa mong may paganayan na kina-address sa amin sa kanong mayaba mga bitya, bangni kami, manabon ibrite kami i-appeal presidente kanon to kanong kinaangin siya. Nag-appeal sa kanin sir kita no sa tabangan tanong sa kanin. Tayanin mana na makalintay po dahil pa. Na niya ba sa maya, ibajampay namin kapag tabangan namin sa kanin sa kanuntuba kabanginin sir kita no kaya na sukalin tano dahil pa tano narangon tanog gapya di ka na sa ako ataw gapya na kapag niya kapag karin dahil pa tano na yata no kailun sa sanggurabo niya na nantong na di ka na pakajawab sa ako sa kita no kaya siya mong pakajawab sa kita no so niya ba sa maya papanganin namin sa kanong katawan no niya ganggulat tanong na naisita rin itatapangan tanong rangon so kaya mo taman ibigyan namin sa kanong ladies and gentlemen this is our only home and we cannot let few individuals destroy it from within. So thank you so much and wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and thank you to all our guests today.
The Chief Minister of the Bangsamoro Government, Ahud Alhaj Murad Ibrahim.
Thank you.
And prior to the closing of our program, we would like to ask everyone kung may mga mensahe po tayo. If you wanted to comment, please join the online discussion sa ating Facebook page at the Bangsamoro Government Facebook page. You may want to pose your comments or recommendations. Kung meron ho gusto magsalita dito, pwede rin po kayong magbigay ng mga statements, short statement on that. If none at this point, may we ask if you could up the Pledge of Commitment? Sige, wala ho. We will be asking everyone to join us in the signing of yung ating commitment sa may labas ho, no? Pero bago yon, ito ho. Babasahin na lamang po natin. Pledge of Commitment. We, the chosen leaders of the Bangsamoro, imploring the aid of the Almighty God, to hereby solemnly make a collective pledge and commitment to work together in realizing the shared vision to establish an enduring peace, balanced society, and a morally upright governance. A servant of our homeland, we hereby dutifully, sincerely, and wholeheartedly commit to be proactive in the protection of the interests of our constituents, at all times observe the rule of law, reject the ideals perpetuating violent extremism done by the BIFF and other ISIS-inspired groups, and will not allow our communities to be a sanctuary of these groups. Muster all necessary resources and mechanisms in eradicating these violent extremist groups in the Bangsamoro, and mutually oblige ourselves to work collectively in creating a condition wherein our people will enjoy peaceful and prosperous lives. We would like to invite everyone to affix their signatures voluntarily with utmost commitment and with our integrity as duty bearers and in furtherance of the call of the moral governance done this 24th day of May 2021 at Sharif Gabunsuan Cultural Complex, Bangsamoro Government Center, Cotabato City. May we invite Senior Minister Makakuwa, Sir Nagib, our gentlemen, men in uniform, to please proceed at outside for the signing of the commitment, and everyone who would like to express their commitment to affix signatures po. Pagkatapos po nating mag-sign sa wall of commitment, may we ask you to come back for a press conference. And also, after you affix your signature, please enjoy the snacks na pinrepare po ng Secretariat and the organizing team. We would like to say thank you to all of the participants online via Zoom and those who have been with us via the Facebook page of the Bangsamoro Government. Thank you for being with us. Hopefully, everyone have learned a lot from the summit. Let's continue the dialogue discussion on this. Sa lahat ho ng mga dumalo dito, members of the Parliament of the BTA, sa mga local chief executive officers, mga ministries, the ministers of the different ministries, sa kanila pong mga personnel, to all our international and local development partners, civil society organizations, and non-government organizations, to the MILG Secretariat, to the Bangsamoro Information Officer, pati na rin sa Office of the Chairman, sa kanila pong lahat. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's affix our support to peace and let's make peace a way of life. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
request all our friends from the media to please proceed now dito po sa SKCC para masimulan na po natin yung press conference. Alright, sa mga magtatanong po, please, dito po tayo sa harap. And then sa mga gusto pong magtanong, ito po, gamitin po natin yung microphone dito sa harap. Alright, I think papasok na rin yung iba. But habang meron ng mga nandito, ay pwede na siguro nating simulan. So, house rules lang muna. Since kulang na po yung oras natin, may hinahabol pa pong meeting, 4:30 si Sir. I will only accommodate one question per media entity. So, please state your name and kung ano yung station, your entity, and then you can throw your question. Only one question, no follow-up question. Alright, first question, Dennis Arcon.
Good afternoon, Alden. Albashir Saiden. Likewise kay Minister Sinarimbo. Just one thing lamang, sir, kumusta po yung naging outcome ito pong Peace and Security Summit po? Thank you so much po.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dennis, doon sa question. Very successful naman yung Peace and Security Summit. Yung sectors na at stakeholders na inaasahan natin na magbigay ng commitments nila ay nagbigay naman po. So, una-una yung mga local government units, yung security sector natin, AFP, PNP, yung mga commanders ng Moro Islamic Liberation Front na nandyan sa area at yung leadership mismo ng Moro Islamic Liberation Front. And then yung mga kasama natin from the development sector, pati ho yung civil society organizations and most especially yung sa religious sector. Kasi parte ho nung challenge natin ay yung interpretation ng religious text na nagbibigay ng maling interpretation at maling paniniwala doon ho sa mga ibang kasama ho natin. So, so far very successful. Beyond doon sa pag-end ng conflict sa SPMS Vax at saka yung sa buong Maguindanao, nagkaroon din ng opportunity na tingnan maigi at i-mobilize yung resources ng regional government at saka ng mga LGUs para ma-address natin yung development gap. So overall ho ay masaya tayo at masaya yung regional government doon sa naging outcome ng Peace and Security Summit na ito.
Thank you very much. Next question, please raise your hand. Okay, ma'am, go ahead. Please state your name and your entity.
Good afternoon po. I'm Crisbel May Lorenzo from 91.9 Nice FM. Nabanggit po kanina earlier yung tungkol po sa Marawi Siege, 4-year commemoration po kahapon. Kumusta na po yung sitwasyon ng ating mga IDPs po doon sa Marawi? Kailan po sila? May date na po ba tayo kung kailan po talaga makakabalik itong mga IDPs po natin doon sa ground zero po ng Marawi? Thank you.
Tama ho yun na yung anniversary ng siege, mga 4 na taon ho ay kahapon, no May 23, nangyari 4 years ago yung Marawi Siege. Yung pong pagpapabalik doon sa mga internally displaced persons ay kasama ho ang regional government doon sa panawagan na pauwiin sila kaagad hanggat maaari. Ang hindi lang ho saklaw ngayon ng regional government yung desisyon doon sa pagpapauwi sa kanila. Dahil ito ho ay hawak ngayon ng Task Force Bangon Marawi. So, si Secretary Del Rosario ng Task Force Bangon Marawi ho ang may hawak kung kailan pwedeng bumalik yung mga internally displaced persons, kailan ho matatapos yung mga proyektong nandoon. Ang regional government ho ng Bangsamoro Government, alinsunod doon sa usapan kay Presidente ay susuporta lang doon sa Task Force Bangon Marawi. So kasama ho sa mga suporta ay yung patuloy na pagbibigay ng tulong doon sa mga IDPs sa pamamagitan ng intervention ng regional government through the MSSD. Naglaan ho yung Bangsamoro Government ng kabuuan na 1 bilyon para ho sa tulong sa pagbangon ng Marawi. Kasama ho dyan yung social services na intervention, mga humanitarian needs nila, housing, and then lately ho ay yung water system ng Marawi na hindi covered ng pondo ng Task Force Bangon Marawi.
Alright, maraming salamat. Next question. Go ahead, sir.
Magandang hapon po, attorney. So, amin pong nasaksiyan kanina yung napakaganda pong pag-deliberation po ng Peace Security Summit po ng BARM. So, ang tanong ko po lang po, attorney, musta na po yung ginawa ninyong executive order na 67 bill po? Yung batas na ginawa niyo pong 67? Executive Order 67 po.
Hindi ako masyado klaro kung yung EO 67 ito yung local na counterpart ng EO 70. Ano ho ang specific na topic ng EO?
Ay yung ginopropose niyo po na Executive Order number 67 about po dito sa corruption po.
Yung pong ang alam ko ho ay merong pending na proposal na magsabatas doon sa anti-corruption drive ng regional government. Kasama ho sa mga recommendation nung Mindanao People's Caucus doon sa kanilang midterm review. Ang kailangan ho natin doon ay action ng parliament. Pero wala man ho yung batas na yon, ay patuloy ho yung programa ng regional government para doon sa pagpapabuti ng pagpapatakbo ng gobyerno. Kasama rito yung transparency at saka yung anti-corruption measures. So, yung pong implementation ng panawagan ni Chief Minister ng Moral Governance ay tuloy-tuloy naman ho yun. Ang hindi lang pa na-actionan sa level ng parliament, yung recommendation nga nung midterm review na magpatayo ng isang ahensya na dedicated para ho doon sa corruption sa region. So yun ho yung hindi pa napapatakbo.
Alright, thank you very much. Sir, go ahead. Please state your name and your entity, please.
Bagwis Europa po ng Radyo ni 88.3 FM, Tacorong City. This is just simply to clarify or whatever the final decisions. I think you have already maybe declared it regarding sa Talitay decisions. At nakita ko naman po na noong April 31, nag-release po kayo nung anyong appointment kay Honorable Moner Sabal. But then ito ay siyempre doon sa declaration ni Governor Bay Mariam Mangudadato na si EBC Pahad Mintimbang as caretaker sa bayan ng Talitay. Ano po yung na-resolve na final conclusion? Sa palagay ko nagkaroon na rin po kayo ng magandang decision doon po, whichever ang magiging oo po. Doon sa Talitay, alam naman natin may conflict na nangyayari pa hanggang ngayon sa Redos o whatever.
Opo, yung tungkol po sa Talitay ay as of today, ang standing pa rin ho ay ang recognition na inisyo ng Ministry of the Interior and Local Government sa pagiging mayor ng Talitay ay si Moner Sabal pa rin. Ang mga kadahilanan nito ay naipahayag ko na ho at simple lang ho ang position ng regional government rito. nagkaroon ng permanent vacancy sa opisina ng mayor dahil ho nagkaroon ng voluntary resignation si naunang mayor, si Montasir Sabal. Dahil ho merong permanent na vacancy, ang rule ho under the local government code specific sa section 44 ng LGC ay yung sunod na pinakamataas na opisyal ang mag-a-assume by force of law. Ibig sabihin ho, walang appointment na kailangan, wala hong ibang action na kailangan, maliban ho doon sa pagtitake niya ng oath at pagpirma ng oath of office. Pagkatapos na ho ay ipapadala sa amin yung papel, pag na-receive ho namin, base doon sa assessment na nag-comply siya, isa-certify ho namin. So yun ho ang nangyari rito. Kaya ho yung pag-appoint ng mga caretaker ay wala hong base sa batas. Kasi wala naman hong permanent vacancy in all of the elective positions of the municipality. So hindi ho nabakante yung mayor, vice mayor, lahat ng kagawad. Kung saan, wala nang tatakbo na gobyerno. So kailangan mo ng caretaker. Pag gayon ho ang nangyari, ang susundin ho nating batas ay EO 15 ni Pangulong Duterte. At sa EO 15 ho, malinaw na ang mag-a-appoint noon ay ang Ministry of the Interior and Local Government o kaya ng DILG sa national o administrative regions. Dahil hindi ho yun ang nangyari, hindi yun ang facts sa Talitay, ang in-apply ho natin ay yung rule of succession under Section 44 ho ng LGC. Sa ngayon ho ay wala pang panibagong papel na dumarating sa aming opisina, kaya ho mag-stand muna yung rule ng o yung recognition na binigay ho ng ministry.
Thank you very much. Gentleman from the back in blue, Nor Gayak pala.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullah, Attorney. Gaano kahalaga itong programa ngayon para ho sa mga Chief Executive na Maguindanao at for recorded purposes, ilang porsyento yung mga alkalde ho na nagpunta rito at yung mga hindi nagpunta, ano kaya may dahilan sila na ipinadala ho sa inyo para kahit papaano ay ma-aware ho kayo na hindi sila makakadalo sa araw na ito. And then sa Talitay, ibig sabihin ba na yung itinalaga mga caretaker ay wala ng visa na sila ho ay mananatili pa rin at sila ay mga opisyalis ng Talitay kung saan ito yung kagustuhan ni Governor by Mariam Sangki Mangudadato, Attorney?
Una ho, yung mga local chief executives na nag-attend dito sa atin ay hindi lang ho ngayon sila nag-attend. Previously, doon ho sa mga naunang workshops na pinatawag natin, magmula doon sa mga barangay captains hanggang sa mga mayors ay nag-attend na rin ho sila. As of today, for today's event ho, 34 ho of the 36 na municipalities in Maguindanao ang nandito. And then, 10 barangay, municipalities ang nandito yung Liga President ng Liga ng mga barangay. Ang mga barangays na ito ay ito ho yung nasa heart ng conflict sa SPMS box. Sila ho yung nandirito sa atin. So, wala pa ho ako nare-receive na kadahilanan. Maaaring nandoon ho sa mga staff na nag-contact sa kanila, pati yung local government operations officers kung bakit ho wala rito yung dalawa na munisipyo. Papakinggan ho natin kung ano ho ang dahilan kung bakit hindi sila nakadalo. But overall, yung pong attendance ng mga local chief executives ay masyado humataas. So, hindi naman ho problema sa atin yon. Hindi ko memorize. Ang nandito sa listahan ko ay yung mga nandito. But we'll provide you po as soon as we get yung anong munisipyo yung wala dito.
Alright, thank you very much. Gentleman in white, please. Yes po, kayo po. Please state your name and your entity, please.
Ang aking pagbati po sa attorney na magandang hapon at the word is congratulations for the had we have the admiration na nagkaroon ng for the good things that happened today and ang kaganapan na nagkaroon ng first Peace and Security Summit Conference ngayon sa ating Bangsamoro. Ang tanong ko lang po, mayroon po ba tayong time frame sa sitwasyon ng pangyayari ngayon na we can have now the true peace in our Bangsamoro land na magkaroon naman ng magandang unity ang buong Bangsamorolandia. Salamat po.
Ang inaasahan ho natin ay kaagad-agad. Kasi ho, yung mga pinagkasunduan sa summit na ito ay i-implement na kaagad. So, kagaya ho nung cooperation doon sa operation ng militar, police at saka ng mga commanders ng Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces o yung MILF na armed wing, yun ho ay pinagkasunduan na nila doon sa pre-summit na workshop kung saan umupo ho yung mga commanders ng MI, commanders ng AFP at saka ng PNP sa isang workshop na finacilitate ng opisina ni Senior Minister Makakua. May kasunduan na ho sila doon kung paano ilatag yung operation. Ito ho ay pinag-usapan din ni Chief Minister, Senior Minister, kami ho, at saka si SND, Secretary ng National Defense last week, at saka si Commander ng Joint Task Force Central, si General Uy sa 6ID last week nung nagpunta ho si Secretary Lorenzana rito. So nailatag na ho yung mga hakbang dyan. Yung pong detalye niyan ay hindi natin pwedeng i-disclose dahil ito ho ay strictly military actions na pinag-usapan ho noong dalawang partido.
Thank you po.
Salamat po, Sir Attorney. Nalimutan ko lang na magpakilala ko. Ako po ang inyong lingkod, ang inyong Kuya Choi, Alswara News. Salamat po.
Alright. Go ahead, ma'am. Followed by Jom.
Magandang hapon po, attorney. Tanong ko lang po, I am Asla. Magpakilala muna ko. Ako po si Aslea Ibad ng ABN Online Radio Pilipinas. Attorney, question po, ano po ang napagkasunduan ng mga mayor sa Peace Summit ng mga LGUs at Bangsamoro leaders? Meron po bang covenant na kayong pinag-usapan na mas mahigit pang maging peaceful ang bawat panig?
Sa level ho ng mga municipal mayors, naglabas na ho sila ng commitment nila in the form of a resolution declaring yung BIFF, yung Dawla Islamia at saka yung ISIS-inspired groups na mga grupo na hindi dapat bigyan ng suporta ng mga komunidad nila at dineclare ho yung mga miyembro nito na persona non grata. So as far as the local government units, the municipalities and the barangays, malinaw na ho yung commitment nila dyan na hindi dapat nandoon sa mga lugar nila yung mga BIFF at saka yung ISIS. So,
okay po, attorney. Sa darating na file candidacy at eleksyon, nakahanda po ba ang ating mga sundalo at mga pulis?
Yung pong patungkol sa election, medyo malayo pa ho yun. Ang filing ho ng Certificate of Candidacy ay sa October pa ho. Yung election period ay kalalabas lang ho ng calendar of activities ng COMELEC. So tingin ho namin ay malayo pa ho yun. Yung paghahanda ho ng AFP at PNP ay sigurado naman ho tayo na ginagawa nila yun.
Okay, maraming salamat po, attorney.
Alright, thank you very much. Next question from Brigada News FM. Go ahead.
Assalamualaikum, magandang hapon po, Sir MILG. Dalawang question lang po yung aking nais ipaabot sa inyo. Una-una, nakafocus lang ba itong summit sa Maguindanao Province? Hindi yata nasali yung ibang probinsya sa BARM. At pangalawa, alam natin hindi sapat itong pagdedeklara ng persona non grata sa BIFF. Ngayon, ano yung solusyon para tayo makatiyak na hindi na mamayagpag pa itong grupo ng BIFF na ngayon ay problema sa bahagi ng SPMS box? Thank you.
Tama ho yun. Yung pong summit ay, for now, ay sa Maguindanao lang siya. Pero ang kasunduan ho ay ito ay gagawin sa lahat ng probinsya. Ang approach ho natin ay isa-isahin yung mga probinsya for now dahil medyo magkakaiba ho yung nature ng peace and security challenge ng bawat probinsya. Halimbawa ho sa Lanao del Sur, ang mas dominant doon ay ang Mauti Dawla Islamiyya Group. Sa Sulu ho, ang mas dominant ay ang Abu Sayyaf Group. Dito sa atin ay ang BIFF plus yung grupo ho nila Toraypi na naka-align sa ISIS. So medyo ho magkakaiba. Kaya ho minabuti na by province muna ang approach. But ang commitment ay gagawin ho ito sa lahat ng probinsya para ho ma-resolve natin yung kanya-kanyang challenges sa mga probinsya. So sa mga susunod ho na buwan ay asahan ho natin na mag-move yung summit na to. In the meantime, yung pong sa Maguindanao, yung pinagkasunduan rito ay papatakbuhin na ho ito. Yung mga lessons learned, kung meron mang hindi tama, kailangan may adjustments, merong konting timpla, ay naasahan ho natin na maging kaparte yun ng mga susunod na activities natin doon sa ibang probinsya. So yun ho ang approach. Yung pong tama ho kayo na yung mere declaration na persona non grata yung mga grupo at yung mga miyembro nila, hindi ho sufficient yun. Kaya ho, ang mga malinaw na hakbang rito ay pinagkasunduan una yung security component nung pagre-resolba nung problema sa peace and security sa probinsya ay ang mas malalim na nag-usap at mas detalyadong nag-usap ay yung AFP commanders, MILF commanders, at saka yung mga police officers. So, sila ho yung cluster nila ang may mga konkretong hakbang na pinag-usapan na kung paano ho gawin yung resolution ng problem. But alam din ho natin na ito ay hindi lang security issue. Gaya ho nung sinabi doon sa mga recommendations nung iba-ibang cluster, hindi ho pwedeng ito ay tingnan lamang na security na issue, kundi kasama ho dito yung governance, kasama ho yung development or yung kawalan ng development doon sa mga area na kailangan ho nating pagpunuan. Kaya ho, ang direktiba ni Chief Minister doon sa mga ministries ay yung mga proyekto at programang nandyan na pinondohan natin noong 2020 at 2021 dahil yung 2020 ho na budget natin ay in-extend natin yung validity up to December of this year. Yung pong pondong yun ay magagamit pa sa ngayon hanggang Disyembre. Lahat ho niyan ay pwede nang gamitin dyan sa SPMS box at saka yung surrounding areas para ho hindi natin kailangan antayin yung mga proyektong pinopropose for 2022 na pupondohan sa budget cycle sa ngayon. Ang kaakibat ho nito, ang Chief Minister ho ay nag-direct na doon sa Ministry of Finance, Budget and Management na i-delay mo na yung final submission ng budget proposal ng mga ministries. Supposedly ay bukas. Pinagbigyan ho yung lahat ng ministries na next week na sila mag-submit ng budget proposal nila for 2022 upang bigyan daan yung mga output na lumabas dito sa summit para ho mailagay nila doon sa proposal pa nila at mapondohan ho doon sa 2022. So yun ho yung approach natin. Doon naman ho sa mga kinumit ng mga LGUs, ang ministry ho ay gagawa ng monitoring and evaluation system para ho matrack namin yung implementation ng commitments na ginawa nila rito sa atin. So titingnan ho natin yon para masundan ho natin kung talaga ho bang kinumit yun at ginagawa. Yun ho ang magiging paraan rito.
Thank you very much. Next question from the gentleman here. After this question, last 3 questions.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala jami'an wa barakatuh. So, ang una dito, sa tingin ng maraming tao, parang mga 90% na po ng nagawa ng BARM sa ating lugar. Noon kasi panahon ng ARM is mga 20 to 30% ang medyo natahimik ang mga tao. Ngayon is 60 to 90. So, sa akin lang po katanungan ito, Sir Attorney. Itong mga kapatid natin, mga BIFF, Islam din. Wala po ba tayong solusyon na sila po ay matahimik lang? Yun lang po, sir. Yung po bang mga kapatid natin, mga BIFF, Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighter, so wala po bang magawa ang BARM na ang grupo nila ay matahimik na at maghinto na sila sa mga kabulastugan na ginagawa nila? Yun lang po.
Sige ho. Una ho ay yung comparison ng ARM at saka ng BARM. Mahirap naman hong ikumpara dahil una, yung pong istruktura sa ngayon ay kaiba doon sa ARMM. Ang isang malinaw na halimbawa ay yung pong budget ng ARMM noon, ang nagdi-determine noon annually ay ang National Congress. Yung pong determination ng Congress kung saan yung prioridad, magkano at paano yung paraan ng paggastos noon, hindi ho kayang baguhin ng ARM yun. Kailangan hong bumalik tayo doon sa Kongreso para mabago yun. Sa ngayon ho, kaibahan ay yung pondo at yung programa ng ARMM, ng BARM, ay dito na lang pinagdidesisyonan sa Parliament ng Bangsamoro. So yung pong priority, magkano, saan, anong programa, tayo na ho ang nagde-decide nun. Kung gusto ho natin baguhin yon ay hindi na rin natin kailangan iakyat pa sa Congress. Dito na lang ho sa atin. Kaya ho, ang isang mapansin nyo, last year, yung pong 65 billion na budget ng BARM, hindi ho nangalahati ang nagastos niya doon. Kasi ho, merong pandemic na hindi kayang immobilize yung, hindi ka pwedeng mag-validate ng area, mag-project inspection, mag-bidding, dahil walang galawan eh. So, ang nangyari ho, yung malaking budget na yun, hindi nagastos, hindi naman po nabalik sa national, nandito lang sa regional treasury natin. Kaya ho, ang naging desisyon ay i-extend yung validity. Ibig sabihin, yung perang yun na hindi natin nagastos last year, hindi nawala yung pera, nandito lang sa atin. Ang ginawa lang ng Parliament ay inauthorize niya yung mga ministries na pwede nilang gastusin yun base sa programa nila hanggang December. Kasi ngayon ho ay medyo lumuluwag yung restrictions sa pandemic. Malaking bahagi ho nung kaibahan noon sa ARM at saka sa BARM. Ang pangalawa ho, kaya ho ang position ko ay hindi kayang ipagkumpara yung naunang ARM at saka yung ngayon na BARM. Dahil magkaiba ho yung structures ng institutions at saka yung policy environment na nag-create nito. Pangalawa ho ay doon sa BIFF, ang una ho ay meron hong mga standing programs yung regional government para sa mga BIFF at iba pang grupo ng mga rebelde na hindi nasasaklaw ng ibang national program, halimbawa ng decommissioning at normalization sa MILF o kaya yung pinagkasunduan sa 1996 sa MNLF. Kung hindi ka ho MNLF at MILF, hindi ka ho pasok sa mga programa na yon. Kaya ho may sariling programa yung BARM para doon sa mga ibang rebelde para ho makapasok sila pag sila ay bumalik. At ang halimbawa ho nito ay yung tugon o yung sinasabi ni Secretary Lorenzana kanina, yung regional program na tumutugon doon sa pangangailangan ng mga rebelding hindi saklaw nung normalization at saka yung kasunduan noong 1996. Ito ho yung pinapatakbo ng ministry namin. Sa ngayon, meron tayong 197 na mga BIFF na pumasok sa programa natin. At ang nangyari na ho sa kanila, meron silang cash assistance, meron silang assistance doon sa araw-araw na pangkabuhayan nila. Meron doon silang training na binigay sa kanila para maka-acquire sila ng skills. Pinag-undergo sila nung psychosocial intervention para mabago ho yung pag-iisip. And then, nakalatag na ho yung livelihood package para sa kanila. Ito ho ay isang livelihood na ite-design base sa pangangailangan nila at skills level nila para ho siguradong maging sustainable. Minimum ho niyan ay 100,000 bawat isa sa kanila. And then may pabahay ho para sa kanila. So yun ho yung programa. For 2021 sa ngayon, meron ho tayong total na allocation na 250 slots. At ang usapan ho namin ay dalhin ito sa Lanao at saka sa ASG naman sa Sulu para ho makabenepisyo rin sila. So meron ho tayong mga programa dyan. Meron din ho tayong ongoing na pag-uusap doon sa mga BIFF na gustong bumalik sa MILF mag-rejoin sa MILF para sila ay maka-undertake ng decommissioning process. Ito ho ay napag-usapan na kay Secretary Lorenzana at saka ho kay National Security Advisor Secretary Esperon. Roughly nasa 600 to 900 ho ito na mga BIFF na gustong bumalik sa MILF. Humiwalay na ho sila dyan sa main group ng BIFF ngayon. Kaya ho konti na lang yung natitira ngayon dyan dahil yung malaking bahagi ng grupo nila ay nakikipag-usap at clear naman ho ito sa national government. Ang naging problema lang ho natin ay yung 10 commanders nila at iba pang miyembro nila ay merong pending, standing na warrant of arrest. Kaya kailangan ho munang ayusin natin yon bago ho sila ma-proceed doon sa process natin. Otherwise, pagka ho hindi natin kinlear yan, bigla silang pumasok sa MILF, meron silang warrant, hinuli sila ng sundalo o kaya ng PNP, masisira ho yung credibility ng programa. So, kailangan ho natin munang maklear yan. Yun din ho ang position ni SND. So, tuloy-tuloy naman ho yung several approaches para ho maayos natin yung problema ho sa BIFF at iba pang grupo.
Thank you very much. Next question. Go ahead, sir.
Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, Attorney. My question is about po the province of the South Cotabato. So, alam po natin na out of the barm tayo. So, may mga kapatid po naman natin doon na mga Bangsamoro. So, the problem is every day may patayan po na nagaganap sa bayan po ng Pulumulok. So, ang barangay, Bintong, Frapper, at saka Datalbab, at saka Biyo, Lapo. So, alam po natin, Attorney, hindi po lahat ng mga tao doon ay member of the ISIS. So, may lakas po sila na pumunta dito pero wala silang magawa. Pero sa pamagitan namin ng mamahayag, nais po nila parating na gusto nila makipagtulungan sa batas at sa inyo na ma-identify ang mga tao doon na hindi po lahat ng mga tao doon ay member of the ISIS. So, hindi po ba matuldukan itong problema nito upang sa ganon ay matuldukan na pong patayin doon sa bayan po ng Pulumulok? Attorney.
Tama ho yun na meron tayong continuing na problema dyan sa may Pulumulok. In fact, I think 1 month ago, nandito ho yung mga pamilya ng mga nabiktima sa mga barangay sa Pulumulok. Yung pong mga namatayan. At ang kasama ho dun sa pag-uusap rito, una ay yung pagbigay ng tulong ng regional government. Nagbigay ho kami ng tulong doon. Tulong-tulong ho yung mga miyembro ng Parliament, Ministry of Social Services and Development, at saka yung sa amin ho na ministry. So nabigyan ho sila ng cash assistance at saka ng mga bigas. Pero alam naman ho namin na ang talagang panawagan nila ay dalawa. Una ay katarungan para doon sa mga namatay na wala namang kasalanan. Pangalawa ho ay yung mabilisang aksyon para mahinto ho o yung nangyayari dyan na may mga namamatay o nahaharas sa kanila. At apparently ang reference nila ay mga tao na pulis o kaya sundalo. Yun ho ang nakarating sa amin. Una ho doon sa problema sa mga pulis at saka sa LGU ng Pulumulok at saka ng mga sundalo, nagpadala na ho ang Moro Islamic Liberation Front ng emisary doon. Ito ho yung CCCH natin, yung Committee on the Cessation of Hostilities. Nakipagdialogo na ho sila doon sa mga kababayan natin doon, local government unit at saka yung security sector nandoon. Inaasahan ho natin na medyo maibsan yung nagiging problema doon sa pamamagitan ng dialogong yon. May mga susunod pa hong hakbang para ma-resolve ho natin yung problema sa Pulumulok. Tama ho yun na ang realidad dyan ay merong Muslim community dyan na matagal na dyan. Noon pa ho. Sa kanila ho yung lugar, dalawa ho ang naging challenge. Una ay merong mga tao dyan na suspected na ISIS. Meron din naman hong mga taong sumasakay doon sa problemang yon at ginagamit yung problema sa ISIS para ho ma-displace yung mga tao at makuha yung mga lupa. So kasama ho yun sa mga nagiging problema natin. So ang alam ko ho ay patuloy na tututukan ng Bangsamoro Government yan at yung mga ahensya natin at mga kasama ho natin sa mga iba-ibang mechanisms ay patuloy na makikipagdialogo dyan. Nakareceive din ho ako ng invitation kay Mayor ng Pulumulok in one occasion. Unfortunately ho na nung araw na itinakdang pupunta ng Pulumulok sa South Cotabato ay meron ho akong naunang commitment na trip sa Manila. Kaya ho hindi ako nakapunta. But ipopursue ho natin yan dahil kailangan ho natin na una, maprotektahan yung komunidad na yan. Pangalawa, ma-resolve ho natin yung problema sa hindi pagkakaintindihan ng communities ng mga Muslim at saka ng mga katabiho nila. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you po. Next question, Mr. Sam Sali. And then last question will be from Ma'am Ludi.
Hello sir, magandang araw po. Magandang araw po sa lahat. Anong challenge or tasking na binigay ng mga LGU sa mga BLGU, knowing na sila po yung unang-unang nakakaalam sa presensya ng mga lawless groups na nasa kanilang mga lugar, sir?
Mayroong hong usapan rito sa security sector at saka yung next higher level ng LGU. Ang una ho rito na pwedeng tingnan maigi ay yung tinatawag nating early warning system. Ano ho yung mga palatandaan na maaaring magkagulo dyan o may papasok na ibang grupo o meron nang nagre-recruit na ibang grupo. Pag naayos ho natin yun, na-in place natin yun, paano ho yung paraan ng pag-transmit ng information na ito? Napag-usapan na rin ho ito. Paano naman ho yung response mechanism para rito sa ganitong mga problema? So, yung detalye ho niyan, ibababa ho doon sa barangay at sa munisipyo at saka yung security sector na nandoon. Pati yung MILF na mga commanders na nandoon para ho maprotektahan natin yung community. Kasi ho yung barangay talaga hong hindi niya kayang labanan yung malakihang grupo na organisado na may armas dahil sila ho ay hindi naman ganon. So, aayusin lang ho natin yung detalye niyan, but yung sa discussion ho ng mga barangays, munisipyo, at saka rin ng security cluster ay pinag-usapan na ho ito.
Do you think, sir, it's high time na kumbaga dagdagan yung honorarium ng mga BPATs o yung mga frontliners ng barangay? Kasi issue nila yan eh. Sabi nila, paano paano itataya namin ang buhay namin dyan? Kapalit, wala lang.
Tama ho yun, mga kasama sa pwedeng pag-usapan maigi. But alam naman ho natin na hindi lang compensation ang magiging issue rito. Kasama na ho yung training, pati equipments. Yeah. Kasi kung haharap po kayo sa, limbawa, BIFF na merong daladalang RPG, siyempre, maski mataas bayad sa'yo, medyo magdalawang isip po kayo. So, kasama ho yun sa aayusin po.
Opo. Etong issue naman sa mga ostads, kasi laging lumalabas sa mga ganitong usapin yung kanilang presence, madalas silang pinagdududahan na responsable sa panghihikayat ng rebellion laban sa gobyerno. Wala po bang regulatory board ang BARM na magre-regulate sa mga ostads na ito bago payagang makapagturo sa mga rasa at saka in fairness naman sa kanila para malinis din yung kanilang record, yung kanilang mga pangalan?
Opo, may mga pagdududa nga doon sa mga madrasa, halimbawa, pati masjid na merong nangyayaring indoctrination na ginagawa. But nagkaroon na ng mas detalyadong pag-aaral dyan at ang sinasabi ng study ay hindi naman talaga madrasa at saka masjid yung recruitment grounds ng mga violent extremists. Pero hindi rin ibig sabihin na walang nangyayaring ganon. So maaaring maliit na percentage yan, pero dapat pa rin hong tutukan. Ang current ho na effort ng regional government dyan ay yung mga madrasa, dapat ho magpa-accredit sila sa Ministry of Education na nakahawak din ho ng Arabic education. Ang kaakibat ho niyan, pagka nagpa-accredit ho kayo, ay may corresponding na tulong doon sa madrasa. doon sa tulong sa estudyante, tulong doon sa sweldo nung nagtuturo at saka tulong doon sa infrastructure niya. Pero hindi ho natin kaya na pilitin lahat na magpa-accredit kasi ho, mababiolate ho natin yung religious freedom clause ng Constitution kung saan maaring malayang mag-pursue yung mga tao nung kanilang relihiyon. So hindi ho natin makakaya yon. But ang ginagawa lang sa ngayon ay ini-incentivize natin yung pagpasok nila sa sistema natin na formal. So ibig sabihin, pag pumasok ka, merong incentives na para humainganyo yung kadamihan na pumasok sa atin. So ultimately ho, ang tingin ho natin ay doon sa incentive na yon ay papasok yung kadamihan dito sa mga eskwelahan at yung mga iba pang institutions of learning na maaaring hindi na mo-monitor nung regulatory body ng regional government. Ang pangalawa ho ay yung mga masjid naman, ang mas epektibo sa ngayon ay yung pong committee sa loob ng MILEP ay meron ng directive na hindi pwedeng mag-deliver ng mga khutbah na wala doon sa standard na turo nung relihiyon natin. So hindi ho pwedeng nagdi-deliver na khutbah doon sa masjid na hindi ino-authorize ng committee ng Moro Islamic Liberation Front para check natin kung ano yung sinasabi doon sa mga sermon. So ito ho ay mga paraan para ho ma-check natin kung ano yung mga doktrinang ikinakalat doon sa ating mga madrasa at masjid.
Baka pwede rin silipin yung kanilang lesson plan bago sila magturo para at least alam natin kung ano yung magiging takbo ng lesson for today. Something like that.
Tama ho yun, na pwedeng gawin yon. Ang hindi lang ho talaga kaya ay pilitin na lahat. Kasi magiging constitutional issue ho yun doon sa religious freedom.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Before we proceed to the last question, I'll just read here a question, sir, from one of our friends from the media who is also watching now sa ating live streaming sa ating Facebook page. Yung question niya, sir, this is from Odessa Cruz pala, sir, of Net25. Sabi niya, with the plans and commitment arrived at this first Bangsamoro Peace Security Summit, ano po ang assurance natin sa mga residente ng mga affected communities na hindi na muli sila babalik sa pagbabakwit gaya ng panawagan nila kanina?
Ang ibig lang hong sabihin, base doon sa mas komprehensibong approach natin sa pag-deal doon sa mga rebelling grupo na hindi kayang pakiusapan, mas organized ho yung mangyayari na military action at mapaghahandaan ho natin yung anticipated natin na displacement. So, maaari ho na hindi pa rin natin ma-prevent yung displacement, pero yung displacement at least na yon ay may kasiguruhan na merong direction yung ginagawa. Pangalawa ho, mas mapaghahandaan ho natin yon at hindi ho siya magre-result doon sa mga nangyayari sa ngayon na mas madaming naiwanan nila sa bahay, hindi handa yung mga evacuation center na dinaratnan nila, hindi handa yung gobyerno na pagsilbihan sila. So yung mga bagay ho na yon ay maiiwasan na natin. Although ang pangarap pa rin ho talaga natin ay wala nang dapat na displacement sa mga kababayan natin. Ang challenge nga lang ho natin ay yung pong kabilang grupo ay hindi nagko-commit na wala nang mangyayaring displacement. So maski ho mag-commit tayo, sila naman ho hindi nagko-commit. So meron ho talagang possibility pa rin na merong displacement. Ang kaiban lang ho ngayon ay medyo planado at hinahanda natin yung lahat ng sangay ng gobyerno at yung mga kasama natin sa local government units at saka sa humanitarian partners natin. So mas mabibigyan ho natin ng atensyon yung mga potential na IDPs.
All right, thank you, sir. Last question. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Minister. Luty de Gracia po, Mindanao News Star. Magtatanong na po ako kaugnay doon sa recent na pagdalaw dito ni President Duterte kung saan nagkaroon po ng quote-unquote warning. Pwede po malaman anong implication noon at anong naging resolution ng province and ng regional government. And then pangalawa po, mangungumusta po ako sa implementation and impact ng pagpapairal or kung pinapairal man ang Human Security Act at saka Anti-Terrorism Law. Yun lang po.
Yung pong tungkol sa pagdalaw ni Pangulong Duterte, alam nyo naman ho na ang nag-trigger noon ay yung incident sa Dato Paglas. At tiningnan niya kung ano yung actual na nangyayari rito. Pagkatapos ho noon ay una, humingi siya ng tulong sa lahat nung nandoon, nung panahon na yun. Local government units, tayo at iba pang mga grupong nandoon sa 6ID nung dumalaw siya. At ang panawagan ho niya ay tulungan siya na marisolba na yung patuloy na problemang ginagawa ng BIFF at iba pang grupo na nasa Maguindanao. Originally ho, yung meeting na yon ay magpo-present yung regional government nung kanyang plano. Ito hong ngayon na pinresent natin sa Peace and Security Summit dahil mga 2 weeks before ho na dumating si Pangulo, inaprobahan na ho ito ng Parliament, itong plano na ito. Ang kagandahan sana kung na-present sa kanya ay magiging mas mabilis yung pag-intindi na merong planong ginagawa doon sa mga BIFF. Hindi nga lang ho nangyari yung presentation sa kanya dahil nagmamadali din ho siya. At ang nangyari ho ay nagkaroon lang ng speech. After that ay nag-disperse na. Ang naging follow-up na activity na lang ay si Secretary ng National Defense, a week after that ay bumalik rito sa atin. At kinausap tayo para pag-usapan yung plano na ito ngayong nilabas natin sa ngayon sa Peace Summit dahil ito ho ay aprobado na. At nagkaroon ho ng pag-uusap sa 6ID, si SND, kami ho at saka si 6ID Commanders, General Uy, at napag-usapan ho namin substantially itong output na nandito sa atin. But in particular, ang talagang naging focus ng discussion kay Secretary ng National Defense ay yung partnership at cooperation nung MILF at saka ng AFP at saka ng PNP. Dahil matandaan ho ninyo yung nag-trigger nung pagpunta ng BIFF doon sa Dato Paglas ay nagkaroon ng inkwentro yung grupo ni Kadialan at saka ni Kagi Wahid ng 118 Base Command ng MILF dyan sa Kitango. Nung pong nagkabarilan sila dyan, naubusan ho ng bala yung grupo ni Kadialan kung kaya't ito ay nag-withdraw at umatras sila. Umalis sila doon sa pinagkukutaan nila sa Kitango. Ang 2 days after, lumabas ho sila sa Dato Paglas. Doon ho pala sila nag-withdraw. In the ensuing military operation doon sa Dato Paglas, tumulong ho yung MILF doon dahil nag-request yung AFP na i-block yung exit ng mga BIFF. In the course of that partnership, 2 hong membro ng BIFF pag nahuli nung 109 Base Command ng MILF at tinurn over ito sa CCCH ng gobyerno ng Pilipinas. Ito ho yung sinasabi nilang 2 nahuli. So, tuloy-tuloy naman ho yung partnership pero ang pinag-usapan ho namin nila Secretary ng National Defense ay paigtingin pa yung partnership na ito at yung mga konting hitches doon sa pag-partner ng MILF at saka ng mga sundalo, dapat ma-address ho yun para mapabilis. Kaya ho lumabas yung mga recommendation na magkaroon ng Joint Operation Center kung saan nandoon yung sundalo, MILF, yung International Monitoring Team, para ho hindi na tayo nag-aayos ng paisa-isa. Na pag nag-operate sila, magre-request sila, pag tumakbo yung BIFF, medyo lumapit sa kampo ng MILF, mag-a-advise pa sila na magtatapon kami ng howitzer dyan sa area ninyo, medyo pumwesto kayo dito. O kaya magre-request sila na yung area ninyo, magkakaroon kami ng operation dyan, pwede nyo bang alisin yung tropa nyo dyan? Ito yung tinatawag na repositioning. Sa matagal na panahon, medyo mabagal ho ito. Kaya ang gusto ho ni Secretary ay bumilis yung movement para ho yung military operation ay talagang ma-enhance at yung partnership magresulta pa doon sa mas magandang nagiging resulta nung partnership ng MI at saka ng gobyerno ho. So, yung pong sinabi ni Pangulo na kung hindi mariresolve yung problema sa BIFF, talaga hong maglulunsad siya ng all-out na military offensive. yun ho ay kapangyarihan naman ni Pangulo. Ang ginagawa ho natin sa ngayon ay gamitin yung kapangyarihan ng regional government at saka yung mga mekanismong pinagkasunduan natin sa peace agreement, ito yung peace process mechanism, para ho ma-enhance talaga yung paglaban doon sa BIFF at mabilis nating matapos ho yung problema.
Alright, maraming salamat po. As much as we would like to accommodate all your questions, ay medyo limitado po yung ating oras. Nevertheless, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. To the Minister of the Ministry of Interior and Local Government and the Head of the READY BARMM, and also the spokesperson of the Bangsamoro Government, Attorney Nagib Sinarimbo, maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. That ends our press conference for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you po. Habol pa ako ng hearing sa Senate at saka yung meeting kay Speaker Velasco.